All right, I wanted to give a little tutorial on how to use this PhET simulation of forces in motion to do our lab for Newton's second law, where we do the two mini labs, where we do mass and acceleration lab, and the net force and acceleration lab. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we can set these things up using the simulation. So in the first lab, which is mass and acceleration with a constant net force. So we want the force acting on our block to be the same. We want to change its mass, and we want to see what happens to the acceleration. So we need to set up a couple things. First, I recommend switching the friction to 0. Just eliminates a force that we don't need to talk about. I need to see some values, the masses, and the acceleration. So here's our bar right here that's going to tell us the acceleration of the object here. Its mass is 50 kilograms. And now any force I apply to it, since there's no friction, will be the net force. So in this case here, I have 100 newtons. Oh, sorry about the screen. Just when it's running. All right, I have 100 newtons of net force acting on the object with a mass of 50 kilograms, and it's accelerating at 2 meters per second, or 2 meters per second squared. If I want to change the mass, all I can do is stack some stuff. I'm going to keep the net force the same, but now I have a new mass, and we're going to see what the new acceleration is. All right, and so I can keep doing that. I can just keep adding objects on top. So now I have a mass of 300 kilograms. I've changed the mass, keep the same net force. The acceleration has changed. All right, so really all I'm doing is changing the mass and finding out what the acceleration is. I'm assuming I'm keeping the same force acting on it. All right, so that's the first lab. The second lab, kind of just reset here, is we are going to be looking at if I keep the mass the same and I increase the net force, what happens to the acceleration? So this time I'm going to keep the mass the same. I'm just going to stick with, we'll just mix it up. I'll do the 100 kilogram one. All right, so I'm going to change the amount of force acting on it and see what happens to the acceleration. All right. I think when it runs, it gets a little weird there. I have a net force of 50 newtons. I can even see if I do the sum of forces. 50 newtons. Acceleration so. Then I can do 100 newtons and see what the acceleration is. All right. I can do 150 newtons. Oh, I think it blinked out on me there. All right, but you see the idea is as I change the amount of force or net force on it, the same amount of mass, what happens to the acceleration? So you need to collect a couple data points on each one of those labs, do your graph and conclusions. All right, good luck.